It's the fact that the company recognized me, and when there was a problem, they took care of it in advance. They brought me advisors, they call them handlers at the airport, who would take me to the gate or, hey, would call me proactively and say, we've rerouted your flight because your flight was canceled, and here's your three options. Which of them do you want? It was understanding that there is a human in the process that just got disappointed. And how do we address that?
Welcome to the Value Factory Podcast, brought to you by One Accord. We're all about helping businesses thrive and grow through leadership, strategy, and meaningful impact. Now, whether you're a seasoned executive or just starting out, our goal is to provide insights and inspiration to help you navigate your journey. Thanks for tuning in.
Okay, Value Factory Podcast with Lawrence Lerner. Welcome to the Value Factory Podcast, presented by One Accord. I'm your host, Andrew Ballard, and today we're going to look at engineering opportunity and turning complexity, crisis, and culture into a strategic advantage. Our guest today is Lawrence Lerner, who is a managing principal here at One Accord and a visionary strategist, product innovator, transformation expert. And we're going to dive a little deeper into his digital transformation expertise. I mean, it's just wild. I've forgotten more about this, or he has forgotten more about this than I'm sure I will ever learn. Dyslexia, I can get away with that. But he's also been part of $1 billion in revenue impact. Big brand experience, small, medium, just awesome. And I was going to talk about turning complex problems into bold opportunities. He's also the leader that CEOs call when they need clarity, speed, and results. So Lawrence, please tell us a little bit more about your background related to this engineering opportunity concept.
When I was a kid, I found a old school rotary payphone that fell off a truck, literally fell off a truck when I was living in Brooklyn, and I took it apart.
How old are you at this point? Six. Okay.
So a lot of muscling it with screwdrivers, wrenches, and other implements. And I became endlessly fascinated with all of the things that were inside it. Not to mention, there was a cash box that was still in there that had coins, and I collected them from there. What it started...
Was this an old payphone?
Yeah.
Oh my gosh. Okay.
Oh yeah. This back in the day. What it started was a lifetime of taking apart complicated things and putting them back together in different ways. And it led me to start asking questions as I got older about business, people, all of the complex things that go through our lives every day.
Mm-hmm.
And I was able to learn from it and learn how it was put together. And then more importantly, how I could put things back together in a way that added value to the people I was working with.
You really developed an engineering mind at a very young age.
I did. And what I learned from it was there is a process and a means to doing things. And by not doing them correctly, things don't work. By being able to explain to people how you deconstruct problems, made it relatable to them, to the adults who were a little upset that I took it apart and started to put together and then added electricity to it because it wasn't connected to anything. And it made it ring, which, as a 6-year-old
That's
kid,
wild. You're probably doing a victory lap at this point. How exciting. I remember this is how old I am. I remember putting dimes into those old payphones back in the 60s. And of course, then it jumped up to a quarter. So I've got another question for you.
Yeah.
One that I just know our audience is going to love to hear your answer. So what do you get when you mix a $1 billion strategist, a trusted advisor, and a death doula together? What do you get with that mix?
You get me, for what that's worth. You get someone who can explain transformation through technology, business, and I've seen the internet, I've seen the rise of social, I've seen the rise of mobile, and I've had my hands in all of those things. And what it's brought is value and opportunity to companies. The internet created commerce. I worked with one of the first companies that was doing about $1 million a year, PC hardware online. The fact that you could go to your computer, configure another computer, and then have it shipped to your home, when 5 years earlier, getting a computer, getting time on a computer would cost you tens, if not well, and someone who could explain it in a relatable way and make the consumer experience something that anyone could do, that you could send to someone who hadn't worked with a computer. Being able to do that trusted advisor, you end up being a trusted advisor by being relatable to the people asking questions. Death doulas, for those who are not familiar with the term, help people through their final journey, the transition at the end of life. That as you're thinking about dying, what's the legacy that you want to leave? That's the biggest question that I get asked is, hey, I've never done this before. And you hear that in tech and in business. How do I do it? And leading them through that change and transformation. I'm doing it right now with several people. I did a conference in Atlanta last month, and people ask me, how do I prepare? Well, how do we prepare for change? And throughout my whole life, that's kind of what I've been doing. It's helping people prepare for change where they know death is very final. They're not coming back from it. It's their final deliverable for those of us in the tech world.
Incredible. And I'm familiar with a death doula and what they do. Is my assumption that part of that journey is working with the loved ones?
Great question. So we call them the circle of care. It's friends, family, all the people that the dying want around and with them, because you're helping them manage grief, bereavement, and what is sometimes called anticipatory abandonment, that you're leaving me, you're dying, and I don't want to live without you, or I don't want to live without this thing, this change that's happening. And we help them think through it, and we help the dying leave a legacy as part of their vigil, part of what they leave behind. I worked with one family, the grandmother and mother had collected 80 years of Christmas cards.
Oh my gosh.
And that became a book and a living legacy that she could pass on to her grandchildren, other members of the family. It had stories, it had history, it had current events, and it made them all feel connected.
Wow. That's an impactful story. So at essence, and I'm not being silly here, but you resurrect companies, you resurrect a product roadmap, and literally resurrect souls in some cases.
I have not resurrected any souls, at least in recent memory. Companies often stagnate in their product development. I've been a product guy for my whole career. Company looks at what they're doing and said, hey, we hit lightning with this first product launch, and we've not been able to do it again. And I always ask people, what are you good at? What's your core competency? Oh, we have this great product, and we run all of the electric and gas in our state. So we're a public utility, but we're trying to build a new product. I said, what data do you have, and what information do you have about your consumers? Oh, we collect what they've paid, what they've done, so you know where in the state electricity is used most. Oh, absolutely. How much gas do they use? Can you look at it year on year? I guess if we wanted to. So you've got all this rich information about how your consumers are using gas and energy in their home. How about businesses? Oh, yeah. So if there was a brownout or a shortage, you'd know which areas would be affected first.
Was that a light bulb moment for them?
That was a light bulb moment. The operations and distribution manager looked at me and said, I can create rolling blackouts or brownouts. Sorry, not blackouts. And I said, you could. You could also tell people which are the more efficient energy heaters and how, based on how much they're using. Do you think you could extrapolate how good their house is? The engineering manager stood up and said, crap.
More than a light bulb moment for
That
him.
was more than a light that was a whole panel of light bulbs. And there's all this rich information. Could we sell this to consumer product companies? Yes. Could we write reports on it? Could we tell consumers what are the better ways to save energy because of this? I never thought about that.
So you're not only advising them on product development, you're introducing them to the opportunity of targeting a brand new market segment,
Yes.
one that they hadn't considered. So that's a double win.
Yeah.
That's huge. That's absolutely huge. And your journey spans industries from life science, retail, healthcare, even blockchain. I know blockchain associated to crypto, and I'm sure it's much bigger than that. But what consistent mindset or principle has guided your ability to lead transformative change across such diverse landscapes? Because you are in so many different verticals.
Change is always about people. You can fix the technology, you can make it do amazing things, but people need to understand the change that's coming, and they need to understand what's their part in it. The piece that always gets missed in transformation projects is that we don't train the people. We tell them, hey, we're giving you a new system, and it's really going to be cool and has 30 more features. And no one sits down with the person at the help desk and says, well, here's what it means for you. It means I'm empowering you to talk to your customers and tell them what are the new things that you can do for them, or enable you to make changes and decisions on their part. You might notice that at some point in the life cycle of bags of chips, true story, we were asked by one of the beverage companies that sells snack products, what can you do with social media other than advertise? So we spent a couple of weeks, we looked at Twitter, Facebook, other feeds, and you know what we learned? Big bag chips taste better than small bag chips.
Really? Well, dive a little deeper into that. Is it a psychological perception or is it reality?
So I'm going to flip it around. You tell me what you think, and I'll tell you if you're right.
Okay. I think that it has to do with perception more than reality, because I assume the manufacturing process for the product is the same, and it's only the packaging that changes.
So that was our first assumption. So we cross-matched all of social media posts with locations in the country and where the chips were coming from. There was no difference in ingredients, but there was a subtle psychological change that the bigger bags made the chips taste better. Maybe it was because people could open them up, sit there and munch on them. But you probably noticed about 15 years ago, those small snack pack size chip bags that you got in your lunch as a kid,
They got bigger.
they got bigger.
Yes, I remember.
Yes, they moved all of them to bigger. Their competitors started doing that. It was the wildest thing. So we knew that the data, and by giving that data to the people who were responsible for packaging and manufacturing, pushing it downstream, not the people who were making big decisions, but the people who were making the deciding factors, said, well, let's try it and see what happens. And suddenly sales went up.
Wow.
And of course, people were willing to pay more for a slightly bigger bag.
Right.
It was fascinating. Every time I think about change, what's the human factor in it? The technology that makes it scale, whether it's vertically by adding more computers and stuff, or horizontally by putting a bigger computer in, are endlessly fascinating to me. And I've engineered what we call carrier class systems, which are used for telephone systems and for credit cards. I've done helped launch one of the major card brands. Endlessly fascinating as to how all of that change works. But when you bring it to people as a process and you unpack it, they eat it up, literally and figuratively.
I remember many, many years ago, and we're talking about packaging and how important that is in the broader marketing mix. And I remember many years ago, Kellogg's cornflakes took the same package that had 12 ounces of volume and then shortened it. And they shortened it not for the consumer, but for the retailer, because it allowed them to by adding an extra shelf, add 20% more SKU space. And I just thought that was brilliant. So, I mean, little things like that can make a big difference. Well,
Absolutely.
that is so cool. The Descent, that's a newsletter article.
Yes.
Okay. And one that I believe you wrote?
Yes.
Okay, great. And you explored how failure can be transformative. If you haven't figured out the theme, it's about transformation here, which, I mean, it gets you from A to C when you can't get from B to C. So can you share a personal moment where failure became a turning point in your leadership?
So it was a hard story. We were brought in by a large business office supply chain, and they were friends of the owners, and they brought him in and said, dude, I need you to make our systems better. First mistake, right? We didn't understand what better meant. We spent 6 to 9 months gathering requirements, refining them, documented it all. Please document everything that you do, tech folk. And we
Good
gave it to the
advice.
president of the company. Big ceremony. He signed off on it with a huge fountain pen because they were an office supply company and they had all the fancy stuff. And we went heads down for 18 months and built it. It had every bell and whistle you could think of. The marketing team, hint, gave us a ton of input on what they wanted and what they needed. We rolled it out. It worked for companies of a size of a barber shop because they were friends of the owner. They worked for major corporations who were buying strategic sourcing and buying 10,000 light bulbs and packs of Post-it notes at a time. We went live. The head of sales stood with one of his customer reps, and he watched him take 20 minutes to onboard a new client. Now, new system, they were trained but unfamiliar with the system. They turned around and said, I needed this system to do 3 things. It's got to be fast. It's got to be fast. It's got to be fast.
It's like, what do you need to know in retail? The 3 things: location, location, location.
And he said, you guys have so over-engineered the onboarding process that no one is going to sit through it. And we had to rebuild quite a bit of rework.
Was that person part of the original upfront team providing criteria and specs? Or did they come in at the end and blow you up?
So I would not put the fault on them. We were building the system. We did not have the ideal handle on who were primary stakeholders. Who's going to use this? What are they going to use it for? Because we built really cool stuff. We knew when your birthday was. We could send you presents. We could say the last 8 orders you've bought light bulbs, Post-its, and wet wipes. Do you want us to resend that to you? Sure. That's a great feature. But the reality is it didn't take me really long to tell you that. I should be able to get on the phone and say, send me 800 boxes of this, and here's my locations. You've got all those documented. We didn't get a good hold on who is the primary stakeholder, how were they going to use it, and most importantly, the thing that I always ask clients now is 6 months after we're live, how are you going to measure success? What are you holding our feet to the fire for? What are the 3 things you need this system to do for you?
And I just think that's great advice to our audience, making sure that you have all of that data up front, before you move into an agile development process or start playing in the sandbox and that kind of a thing. So twice you have talked about onboarding and training. The first example was a new system and they didn't train the staff. And we're going to get into this a bit later, but you talk about how you need to keep humanity at the center of innovation. That's one of the coolest things I've heard. You've been sharing that quite a bit, and we're going to dive into that. And so those are 2 examples of making sure you have the right people at the table at the front end before you need to reverse engineer. So you're known, Lawrence, for turning complexity into a competitive advantage. Can you walk us through a moment when you identified an overlooked interconnection in a business that unlocked major value?
People buy things, and this is something I came up with in the really early days of internet work. People buy things. There are so many touch points and data points that loyalty to what you're buying, to what you're consuming, people don't want points. People don't want, tchotchkes or recognitions. Hey, you've bought $1 million worth of stuff from us. They want things that are relevant to them. So as I was looking at the way cash transactions worked, and this led into blockchain, cryptocurrency, I've built the loyalty programs that millions of people use every day or enable those companies to buy things, or sell things. We track what you buy. We know what it is. So when the coupons come to you in a little envelope in the mail, there are things that are important to you. People want to be recognized and rewarded for the things that are important to them. I used to fly 250,000 miles every year. The things that were most important to me weren't the ability to buy or get upgrades on flights. It's the fact that the company recognized me, and when there was a problem, they took care of it in advance. They brought me advisors, they call them handlers at the airport, who would take me to the gate, or, hey, would call me proactively and say, we've rerouted your flight because your flight was canceled, and here's your three options. Which of them do you want? It was understanding that there is a human in the process that just got disappointed. And how do we address that? Because we know what their preferences are. We know what the things they want and need are, and we're providing them data and service, and most importantly, an experience. That experience that they get. Harvard Business Review wrote an article a bunch of years ago called Welcome to the Experience Economy. And being able to deal with that for people means that you have the technology and everything else to back it up. So the transformation is not only very natural, but it provides them the things that they were looking for most, so that they will recognize you, your brand, or if they have to do work with that. I was talking to one of the business intelligence companies, and they pointed out, oh, well, we're going to start giving all of our reps information about people as they call in. And I said, how are you going to use it? Oh, we're going to tell them the last 5 things they bought and their preferences. And I said, people are used to that now. They're also used to it becoming overwhelming when people go, oh, so it only took you a month to go through these supplements. Are you taking more? Like, hold on.
That sounds a bit invasive.
It is very invasive and very creepy. It's like, let's look at how we use the information. Here are some supplements. Here are some related products and things they could use or do with it. Could you recommend those things without saying, I see you've been taking more vitamin D than usual? Don't be invasive. Be careful. Be thoughtful about how you use the information and provide innovation for people.
Or we noticed your data usage last month was up 47%. That's kind of nuts. Back to the airline example, 250,000 miles a year. I mean, if that isn't frequent flyer on steroids, I don't know what is. But it sounds to me like you really had a concierge experience from the airlines.
Absolutely.
Well, and that's what entrenches loyalty. And that's fantastic. So, tone at the top, you have a weekly newsletter. In fact, I think you're over 80 issues in. So you've been doing this for a while. So tone at the top is a reoccurring theme in your leadership philosophy. So how do you cultivate that tone?
What's important and what's culturally relevant to people? My topics, people always ask, oh, are you using AI now to create all your themes? How do you research them? They're in daily conversations that I have with clients. I had one client who has a great team. They've been growing year on year. They don't know how to manage their mid-management staff. They have so many questions about how to lead them. And I said, wow, that's a really great question. Leaders go for executive MBA programs. They get trusted advisors, executive coaches like One Accord provides. But the middle management, maybe once a year, get a seminar. So I said, what could we write about that would be digestible for leaders on how to listen? Because middle managers have it from both ends. They get it from leadership. I need you to do this. They get it from staff going, why doesn't anybody listen to us? Isn't my opinion important? So let's figure out how to communicate and support those people.
You know, and I know from my own experience, there can be a real disconnect between leadership, as in the CEO or general manager, and middle management, because it has to go through the SVP or the department head, and things can get lost in translation.
Yeah.
And so that's just not everybody being on the same page. Outstanding example. So in reading about you, Lawrence, $1 billion of revenue impact, I mean, that just stood me still. So which product or transformation are you most proud of and why?
So I came to a company called Cognizant, offshore outsourcing, and the industry didn't have a great reputation. People were asking, how smart are they? How good are they technically? How do I know what they're doing? And this is a question that Boomer and some Gen X managers ask as well. How do I trust them? And I said, well, we know what the technology is. And this was about definitely building a lot of deep technical expertise. But we designed a system out of the finance industry called portfolio analysis. And by looking at their systems, creating complexity models for, hey, we're working on a back office system. We've got keeping with finance, a mortgage and loan system. If we're going to outsource this, how can we prove that we can do? And what's the smart system to outsource? Things that required deeper innovation or a human in the loop where the loan officer is making a judgment call and saying, here's the loan that you get. We're not going to be able to build that in at that time into those systems. But there were other systems, all the website, other things we could figure out mathematically and share those scores with clients. And I took what was one of the top 5 healthcare companies at the time and introduced them to the technology, the team. And in those days, the team would introduce themselves by saying, here's my college and here is my batch number. My batch number was where I fell in the class that I had been onboarded in. And it was completely baffling to a North American or even a European audience. It was actually very off-putting. And they were very mechanical. This is my role. This is what nobody, and I said, nobody wants to hear that. They want to hear, my name is Sumita. I have been a DBA working on Oracle on systems like yours for the last 6 years.
All of a sudden it's relevant now.
It's relevant. It's in context, but she was a person. She wasn't this wooden mechanical figure standing up going, this is what I do. They want to get to know you, because when things go sideways, and we all know they do in technology, they want to know that there is a human being helping me out, and that if I need to call you in the middle of my night and say, what's going on? I'm not going to be off put by, something that sounds like a voice recording. It's like, hey, here's what broke. We didn't expect these changes. And this is what I and my team are going to do to get it fixed. Can we talk again in 6 hours, end of our day, and tell you where we are? Which of those sound like you have someone at your back, a whole team at your back, and this person is representing them to you? That took us from a bunch of foreigners that nobody understood. It was very opaque. And Forrester wrote an article about it. Here's a company that punches above their weight and actually goes and builds client universities, like training modules about your company at our cost, so that when you had someone come on board, again, onboarding, they were educated, they knew the systems, it was all documented. Write it down, please. And you had human beings that you could reach out to. And I saw the former CIO 6 years ago. And that had been after 11 years of working together. They're at almost 20 years of working together, and the story goes on.
Awesome. Well, you have used the word people a dozen times during our time together, and you really bring humans into the equation. And I love that. So you've written about the importance of a people-centric approach in a tech-driven world. So how do you keep the humanity at the center of innovation? I kind of teased this question 15 minutes ago. In a world increasingly led by AI and automation. You just gave an example with this company you were with for some time
Yeah.
about how sterile the presentations were. They weren't personal. There wasn't a connection. So how do you keep that people-centric approach at the forefront of everything you're doing in our AI and automated world?
So I have to go back 150 years. In the mid 1950s, Alan Turing created a test for AI. Said, if you can have a conversation with a computer, a Turing test, it will tell you whether you're talking to a living person or not. When you can't tell the difference between two different speakers, one of them being an AI, one not. And I said, that's great. But AI can mimic things. 100 years before that, Ada Lovelace was the first programmer and programmed before anybody even knew what the word meant, founded the entire discipline of programming and computer science. She was a brilliant woman who died at 36. She posited that if a machine could come up with an original idea, and I bake that into everything, what's the original idea? What's the transformation, the transformative effect that this technology has, the user experience has, and you bake that in, that's real innovation. That is intelligence, that is thinking. So that Loveless test for what's true human innovation, because to date, no computer, no, fancy LLM has come up and said, I think I'm going to go create a light because I want to be able to see in the dark and I don't want to carry a torch for it. And I try to bake that thinking into every interaction, every thought, say, what's the really human, innovative, novel element that we've created with this technology and transformation? And whether it's as simple as, hey, we're going to allow people who are giving loans or giving credit cards a higher credit limit. And we're going to push that down to the staff who are talking to that first time buyer, college student, whatever. That's that human element. There is a spark there that says, I never thought about that.
Is that mainly because computers don't have pain points or desires?
They don't have pain points. They don't have the thing that I need to do. So the other thing is, why do you buy a bed? Honest question.
To have a comfortable night's sleep.
That's it. And why do we have tools, or why do we have health monitors? Not because I want to look at the numbers, but I want to improve my overall health. I want to be fit. I want to live longer. There's a benefit to having certain things. Computers don't have pain points. They don't understand benefits. Computers are going to be able to say, oh, I need a bed that holds this much weight or is big enough to hold my spouse and myself.
Or my 700-pound dog.
Well,
a little bit silly,
but it's a good point. It's like, wait, who are you sleeping with? I sleep with my spouse, my dog, my two cat, my former partner and I, 2 dogs and a cat. And so there's got to be room for the cat to walk around the bed. And it's not something you ask a CAD drawing or an engineering diagram, say, how much space do I need for the cat? The CAD drawing is going to go, I'm sorry, what? No, those are the innovations that people think about. And what's that experience? The experience is so important. And that's what that's what tells us we need things to scale. We need them to be more robust, or they need to give us feedback and information. Today, you can buy beds that tell you everything, how cool it needs to be, how warm it needs to be. This side needs to be higher because Lawrence snores. Cut that part. Or this side needs to be higher because I get up in the middle of the night. All of those things around innovation and the human in the loop are really what I think about, and sometimes I think about what does it mean to remove the human in the loop. I spent the last 10 years more building unattended retail. Where can we take the human out of vending machines, grow markets, buying things online? Because we don't actually need a person. When we do need the person, it's a much more removed operation.
Yeah, that's a great point. I remember during COVID at the University of Washington, they shut down the cafeteria and they did not replace the cafeteria 3 years later when we started experiencing some sense of normalcy.
Mhm.
Everything was vending. And instead of having a half a dozen people behind the counter, they had one. And so they never went back to the original model. Makes sense. Well, I've got one more question, one that I think will really tie in to what our leaders, entrepreneurs, and business owner audience care so much about. And I've been teasing this since your introduction, and that is you are an expert about digital transformation. Can you explain why, in simple terms, what that means? And for an enterprise, why it matters?
Great question. I just talked to one of my colleagues who runs an engineering firm. We started with analog really far back. The Sumerians, 5,000 years ago, carved things into clay blocks. And for the next 4,000 plus years, we wrote things on paper. It didn't really change very much. That original, here is my accounting record, and I put it down, and someone else can read it and then retranscribe it with potential errors if they need to. Then we moved to electronic. I key punched it in, and then I could transmit the data. Digital means that I took the original digital information, and I did this for one of the tax prep companies, all of the information that Andrew has about his taxes. I'm going to take that off of his computer and put it into an app or upload it into our cloud-based system. That's digital. Electronic information to electronic information. Your digital records are maintained and managed there. And then they become living records. Every year you pay your taxes. Every year you take deductions. All of that is digital transformation, moving from paper, analog based, or dependent on human interaction to I'm moving this from place to place. My colleague made the change of working on a shop floor. She said they started with paper blueprints and plans. They'd finish them up, make sure that everything was right, and then she'd bring it over to a machine and someone would build it. And then we moved to CAD drawings, which meant that it was easier to make changes. The efficiency in digital transformation is where the value is. And then from there, they could plug those numbers and designs into a robotic arm, and the robotic arm would make things. Now they're taking digital information. Everybody uses this term. Call me if you still don't understand it. Make a digital twin. Now, what does that really mean? There is some physical object, a car, a desk, a microphone with all of its parts, and that we have a digital representation that says this microphone maybe has 75 to 100 parts in it. And I have them all stored in the cloud, how they interact, how they get soldered together, how much electricity it needs, all of the things that make it work.
It's like an SOP.
It's like a standard operating procedure. And then I can look at it online, manipulate it. Maybe I want it to be bigger. Maybe I want it to work in noisy areas. And then I can plug that into all without putting it on paper or skipping a step or making, fat fingering it. I bring it online and then say, okay, robots, go build this. And we're getting to the point where we can 3D print many of these parts. So the machine will take the boards, spin them, create components, and then assemble, meaning that one person can now manage dozens of products with a higher rate or lower rate of mistakes, errors, and more efficiency. That's what digital transformation does for your business. It makes it more accurate, more efficient, and it will cut the cost and time saving of rework if you haven't tooled something correctly. Endless possibilities But ask yourself, where is the human in the equation? What is the part that an engineer, you still need a smart engineer to design and implement this stuff. And then as they bring it together, they can test it at a much higher rate of throughput.
Those are excellent examples. And it reminds me of the office equipment industry. Say 20 years ago, they moved the best practice from copy machines to actually scanning the documents. You've said document, document, document. Without the documentation, it's very difficult to standardize and replicate. But they went from they took companies from using a file cabinet to the cloud. And to me, that's my simple version of digital transformation. I got to tell you, every time we sit at a table, I grow more brain cells. I so appreciate your time, and I appreciate our audience joining us for the Value Factory, again, presented by One Accord. I'm your host, Andrew Ballard. Our awesome guest today was Managing Principal of One Accord, Lawrence Lerner. Thank you.
Andrew, thank you. It's always a pleasure to talk to you.
Awesome episode. Until next time, let's grow.